Sheet and pillowcase were slimy with oil, yet the chamois skin bag was safe. "But he didn't get what he wanted," I finished. "Good!" said Anthony, who had lighted both candles. "Let's go look for him." "I've been, and couldn't see anything." "I know. I heard a sound. I sang out, and you didn't answer, so I thought something must be up. Let's have another try. I've got Miss Gilder's watch." I slipped Biddy's bag into the pocket of my pyjamas, and pulling on our boots we went out into the night. "It's their tent I'm thinking of," I said, though I'd never talked of Brigit O'Brien's affairs to Fenton. If someone had planned to rob them, not knowing of the change we made at the last minute. All our Arabs did know. I'm not talking of them. We've been here 2 days. Anyone could have spied on us enough to find out which tent was Mrs. Jones's and Miss Gilder's. "You're thinking of Bedr?" "Well, yes, I suppose I am. Biddy never believed they were Germans." "Who, those chaps in checked clothes he had in tow?" "By Jove, yes. I heard her speak of a scar on the forehead of one. She thought he might have been Burke, the fellow in the street row, that night at the House of the Crocodile." "These things happen to heiresses in old fashioned story books," said Anthony. "But there's nothing that happens in a story which can't happen in real life, I suppose, especially to a girl. She " "Oh, but I wasn't thinking of her," I began, then stopped, shocked because it was true, and also because I was unwilling to tell why my thoughts had turned to Mrs. Jones. "We must find out if they're safe," I went on. "The thieves seem to have got clear away, and we're not likely to find them, unless they've gone to our old tent." "Come along," said Anthony. "We'll slip on something, and call the ladies as softly as we can, not to disturb the others and have the whole camp buzzing like a beehive. When we're sure they're all right, we can attend to such details as searching for tracks." He seemed as eager as I was, to know that the 2 women were safe, but there was no sign to tell me about which one he chiefly concerned himself. A minute transformed him from a pajamaed Englishman into a robed Egyptian of that old fashioned order which despises things European. Only he forgot to put on his turban. I didn't think of the omission myself at the time, but I recalled it later. Going to the tent which had been ours, I scratched on the tight drawn canvas near the spot where I knew one of the folding iron bedsteads was placed. "Biddy! Biddy!" I called, gently, and after a few repetitions I heard her voice, rather sleepy, a little anxious, cry: "Is that you, Duffer?" "Yes," I whispered, seeing the tent quiver in the region of some cushiony buttons. "Antoun and I are both here. But don't be scared. Could you come and peep out from under the door flap a minute?" "Yes," said she. "Go round there and I'll come." There was not much delay, for Biddy's crinkled black hair needs no night disfigurements by way of patent curlers. In a few seconds the door flap waved, and Biddy looked out into the starlight, the yellow glimmer of a candle flame within the tent silhouetting the Japanesey little figure wrapped in a kimono. Behind her dark head and above it floated a mist of bronzy gold, which I took to be Miss Gilder's hair. There seemed to be quantities of it, and I should have been feverishly interested in wondering how long it was, if I had time to think of anything but my thankfulness that Biddy and Monny were both safe. "Are either of you ill?" asked the creamy Irish voice which had never sounded half so sweet as now, in the starlight and fragrance of this strange night. "Because if you are, I've some lovely medicine." "I wouldn't frighten them any more than I could help, if I were you," I heard Fenton mumbling advice in muffled tones at my back. For obvious reasons I made no audible answer, but I had just been resolving not to tell Biddy my suspicions unless it were necessary to do so. "No, we're not ill," I assured her, "but there's been a silly sort of scare about a sneak thief. May have been a false alarm, and we won't say anything about it tomorrow if others don't. We're horribly sorry to disturb you and Miss Gilder, but we couldn't rest without making sure you hadn't been worried." "You heard nothing, did you, Monny?" Brigit threw a question over her shoulder to the floating mist of gold. "No, and I wasn't asleep either," Miss Gilder's voice answered. "I was lying awake thinking about its being our last night, and lots of things." "I was lying half awake too, thinking of lots of things," Biddy mimicked her friend, "or I shouldn't have heard you so easily when you scratched on the canvas. Oh, by the way, Duffer, did you or Antoun Effendi find a little chamois skin bag under the pillow?" "I found it," said I, and this gave me a chance I had been wanting but hadn't quite known how to snatch. I was rather worried over the responsibility. Of course you knew that we'd take care of your treasures. "It's all my money, and just one other thing," Biddy answered, with an odd little hesitation in her manner, and a catch in her voice. "I should hate to have anybody open that bag. I'm thankful it's safe. With you I know it's sacred. All the same I'd like to have it, if you don't mind the bother." "You oughtn't to carry the thing about with you, if it's so important," I scolded her. Why not leave your secret treasure, whatever it is, and most of your money in Cairo, when you come off on an expedition like this?" "I don't know," she mumbled evasively. "I'm used to having this thing with me. I can't think how I forgot it under my pillow. I never have before. It isn't the sort of valuable one keeps in a bank. Monny embroidered the bag when she was a little girl. It was her first work. I taught her how to do it. And she gave it to me for a birthday present. I wouldn't lose it for the world." "You shan't," I said soothingly. I had heard what I had been afraid to hear, but why should Biddy's trip be spoiled by another worry if I could shield her? We could not know that the oiled hand had been groping for that bag, and I resolved not to distress Brigit by putting the idea into her head at present. "Go to sleep again in peace, both of you," I went on. "All's well since you're well. Probably some prowler has been sneaking round the kitchen tent." "Yes, the news of the lamb has gone forth," said Biddy. "Good night." "Good night," I answered. Down went the tent flap, and hid the sparkle of eyes in starsheen, and mist of gold in wavering candlelight. We trusted that the two had crept back to their beds, but we did not return to ours. We took one of the camp lanterns and searched for footprints, those which were freshest after the rain. The rough grass growing sparsely out of the sandy earth was not favourable to such attempts, however, and even at dawn, when we looked again before the camp was stirring, we made no notable discoveries such as amateur detectives make in books. Our next expedition, as soon as light came, was to the town, where we inquired at the few hotels, and put questions to the police. Nobody answering the description of Bedr and his two companions had been seen in Medinet, and we had to go back to camp baffled. There was our adventure, and when we reached Cairo by train, the mystery of the oiled hand was still unsolved. Chapter 17